croeso cynnes I chi gyd. Diolch yn ddod. Peter Thomas ydw I, a dwi'n bennaeth sgiliau a gallu digidol yn y Canolfan. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thanks everyone. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. My name is Peter Thomas and I'm Head of Digital Skills here in CDPS. Dwedwch helo yn y chat. Dwedwch wrthym pwy ydych chi ac o bled chi'n dod. A pharhau I ddefnyddio'r sgwrs drwyddi draw am sylwadau a cwestiynau, please. So, defnyddiwch Gymraeg neu Saesneg. So please use the chat, say hello, tell us who you are, where you're from, and continue to use the chat throughout this afternoon for comments and questions. And ask or write in English or Welsh, please. That would be great. Okay, so today's webinar is the first of 3 that will focus on the themes of attracting, recruiting and retaining talented people in public services in Wales. We are especially focused on digital roles today, and we start our mini-series by looking at the attract part of that, the attracting people. So the structure is pretty straightforward. There are 3 of us who will be presenting. I'm first with a little bit of background and context, and then Lauren will share her experiences in attracting candidates to CDPS and from before, with Gemma finishing up talking about our use of social media here in CDPS to attract people. We'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end too. First then, just to start, please would you head to menti.com, either use your browser or use your phone. You can scan the QR code up on the screen there, and please answer 3 quick questions for us. It'll give us a bit of understanding as to your expectations, what you know already, and whether our webinar is actually hitting the mark. We'll come back to these later on. Okay, I'll give everybody a minute to do that now. I think Gemma's in the background here. She's monitoring who's doing what. So perhaps, Gem, if we've got some answers, let me know and we can... Yeah, it's working, so things are coming in, and yeah, it's all coming in live. It's very exciting. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So menti.com and use the code 6255-2177 or scan that little QR code, please. Thank you very much. Okay. Right, shall we get moving? On to the next slide. Thank you very much. And we are going to see this slide a few times. There's variations of this slide. I use it as I talk. It's just a reference to show progress through the presentation, so you can keep up with where we are and what's coming next and such like. We'll be on the underlined section. So I'm going to start off with some background and context. Okay, on to the next one then. So this is a picture. And I think this picture, I'll explain where it comes from in a moment, but I think we all acknowledge that there's a recruitment crisis, but that's also an attraction and retention crisis with many layers. Earlier this year, the Chief Digital Officers in Welsh Government, the Welsh Local Government Association and in NHS Wales, together with CDPS, decided that we needed to act to intervene in this crisis. So the first step taken was CDPS interviewing a wide range of stakeholders right throughout August period over the summer to establish the range of issues we all faced. It became clear that these issues were right across the public sector. We grouped them into 3 broad categories, as you can see on the screen. You'll see that there are some overlaps, and I'll go into some of the detail of what those green post-it notes say in just a moment. It also became clear in this work that lots of people were already making attempts to address these problems. For example, Sam Hall, who was the CDO in WLGA, spoke a lot about this in the Socketim Presidential Conference during the summer. And lots of work had begun on a barter, borrow, buy scheme. And lots of papers have been produced advising on salaries, pay gaps, and such like. But as the Centre for Digital Public Services, we're in a pretty unique position of having a view across all of the public services. And, we know other people are doing similar sorts of work. So this webinar and our whole attract, recruit, retain work stream is all about sharing those burdens and potential solutions. Okay, so onto themes. We took the initial data and looked for themes, things that were common for everyone. There are 9 that we found, and I'll zip through those now. If you're here now in this webinar, you're probably familiar with them all, so I won't dwell on them all, and we get into details and solutions a bit later on. Okay, so number 1, pay gap. I think everybody recognizes this, but essentially, usually HR practices do not recognize digital roles or the technical skills differently, and departments are experiencing being basically out-competed in the market. People being poached for more money elsewhere, seems to be about 20% more in lots of cases. And there are occasions where at the moment, if you don't manage people in some organizations, then you're unable to progress above a certain pay grade without, so you may have a technical skill and a superb technical skills background, but without being in a position to manage people, you're not going to be able to move up. So there's no career progression. There's access to market supplements, but the process to obtain them is pretty complex and it's rarely achieved. And then what we find is that contractors are being hired in to fill the resource gaps. And in some places, that's going to cost a lot more money than fixing the solution ourselves. Okay, alignment and consistency of job roles. So this is really interesting. Departments within organizations often use different roles and titles for the same job or type of job, which means people wanting to join are increasingly confused by the advertised roles or titles. Internal people are unable to internally move into different departments. I mentioned clear progression, career progression or bandings, even within same job families, which impacts the level of engagement that people have with job adverts, confusion as to what the roles are, delays in recruitment processes, and internal mapping of skill sets. It's all quite complex. I mentioned engagement with the job adverts. This is a really key thing, and I'm not going to dive in too deep here because Lauren's going to talk a bit about this later on, but job adverts are generally found to be too confusing and too complex. There's far too much information, which often detracts from people applying. Language is often difficult to understand. They're bloated, streams of competencies required, specific skills. Hiring managers are the people having to write them each time, and there doesn't seem to be a standardized approach that's working well. Most departments don't use recruitment methods, things like LinkedIn or Twitter, and where they do, it's often with a lack of experience or it's quite piecemeal. So within this area is the job title issue as well. There's some confusion in how HR processes operate, and also how they can slow down and negatively impact recruitment. There's some confusion as to whether you need to go internal first, as the saying goes, going internal first. Some people we spoke to weren't able to shortcut this, but some were, and were able to go externally at the same time, which again adds to the confusion. This can create bottlenecks, as you have to clarify the process with HR each time just to get it right. When you do follow the HR process of perhaps going internally first, departments are unable to compete with timings of roles like the UK DDAT roles, for instance, the digital data and technology roles, which tend to be advertised and people put in post within a very, very short time frame. Digital roles are in demand. Lots of approvals get in the way. People need internal post approvals, job descriptions to be written, job evaluations to be agreed. Shared services need to contribute in lots of cases. Essentially, the digital job market is really hot, and you have to move quickly to capture the best people. So I'm conscious that not everyone here will have DDAT or digital data and technology roles specified within their organizational structures, but the processes we're talking about here may sound familiar anyway, and they will probably be affecting all specialist IT and digital roles. Okay, a bit similar to the alignment of job roles and titles, career progressions and pathways, there are limited discussions of these, and there's no clear bandings of different levels of the same job. For example, people who are junior content designers perhaps becoming senior content designers. Does that pathway even exist? and quite often people are looking elsewhere for those. There are limited entry routes for people without the experience but who want to learn and grow, perhaps university leavers or apprentices. Job evaluations. Okay, at the moment, there's no clear and consistent way to evaluate job roles across the Welsh public sector. There seems to be a lack of rewarding technical or digital job roles as well. This is an interesting one. No join up across Wales. We're a pretty small nation, all things considered, but everything seems to be done individually or by each department. For each role, individual hiring managers tend to go through the pain of the entire process from scratch. That might be helping write the job advert, going through all the approvals, using whichever recruitment channel is agreed, and you know, quite often as inexperienced HR people talking to HR all the time, all the way through that process. There seems to be a case that there's a crossover with roles that the public sector need, but there's no combined effort to recruit people. This is another one I find really, really interesting. We are not in the public sector very good at selling ourselves, and things have moved on in lots of areas, and things that were selling points for becoming a public servant seem to be quite common in other areas. So benefits like flexible hours, you know, opportunities, or all of that sort of thing seem to be not seen as in the same light these days. So maybe it's the job adverts that we're using, or in the interviews or communications. There's a consensus that the Welsh public sector doesn't do a very good job of selling itself well enough, and applicants, potential applicants, don't understand the true value of the great work that we do. Okay, so DDAT roles, these digital data and technology roles I'm keep referring to, have been around for a long time. They're a very effective and efficient way of making better and better public services. And I understand not everybody here will have DDAT roles in operation. They might not even be on the agenda for future consideration. But essentially, there was a consensus in the research that we did that there's a lack of understanding across the public sector and within organizations themselves, you know, different teams, about what digital roles are and, you know, the actual value that digital skills can bring. So people may well be living in Wales, working in England, or living in Wales, working for a UK government department that's based in Wales, perhaps. But there's generally a lack of awareness we found across the Welsh public sector about what we're offering, what the digital roles are. Okay, so a quick canter through, you know, what the themes were and then what's happened so far. So in response to this research and the emerging themes, we have, if we go on to the next slide, please, Elise, we can have a look at this, this sort of map, this roadmap that we created, trying to map out what we could do about this. And this is all early days, it's still in motion, lots of more detail being added and discussions about where things fit in this map. But essentially, we've looked at a plan for trying to tackle things and then looked at things that are going to take a lot more effort and time to take a bit longer. We found some quick wins, and I'll mention some of those in a moment. This webinar is part of that, this series. We've also convened a growing steering group, so there's lots more people from across Wales involved in the steering group now. But for the next step, let's have a look at the quickest wins, please. So you can see it's quickest, not quick. But this is the first one, and this is where we are now. So we're busy creating model job descriptions. We are thinking about LinkedIn strategies. We're talking about advert wording, and I won't go into too much detail on any of these because Lauren's picking up lots of this in her section, as well as Gemma, about the social media sort of strategy that we use later on. But I think this is the point of this for me is that it's a mindset shift that's needed. And I've talked to lots of people across the public sector in Wales. Or at least if you press the button now, we've got a horrible old animation that I put my own PowerPoint skills. This is Newid Mewn Barn, mindset shift. And I think it is a bit of a mindset shift. I think, you know, I've been in the public sector for a long time, and where it used to be the case that we could put an advert up and we'd have lots of interest, lots of applications. People would come to that. Maybe it was on our website, they'd find us and come to it. And it was almost the case that they should be grateful that we're offering them a job in that sense. That's not the case anymore. It's a candidates market. High caliber candidates will be inundated with messages, either within, in-house, from agency recruiters, people on LinkedIn. It's important that campaigns that we use are people first. And again, Lauren will talk a bit more about all of this later on. But this is different. This is a different approach where we need to make our campaigns attractive. We've got to think about more diverse applicants, consider how many neurodiverse people, for instance, don't apply or are excluded immediately by the text or the existing processes we use. But as public services, we need to reflect the public. We need to, have people within the organisation and within the services that reflect the population. So it's really important to fix some of this. It's important to engage with passive candidates too. Passive candidates are people who are not necessarily looking for a job, but upon being approached, would be willing to think about moving. And that's something that we've never done in the public sector before, to actively go looking for people in that sense. So essentially, we are going to use some blog posts, we're going to use some comms, we're going to use templates, we're going to be running webinars, things just to raise some awareness. We're going to collect together materials that people are using, the job descriptions, and create this concept of a best practice recruitment package. Okay, let's go on to the next one then. So this is another of the quickest wins. So CDPS acting as a recruitment conduit. This is a really, really interesting opportunity here. So CDPS is an arm's length body, many of you will know. We have slightly different rules than, say, Welsh Government or local authorities, perhaps, giving us a little bit more flexibility. And one of the things is the way we've approached our own recruitment. So we've worked with a company called Future Heads. They're deployed within our organization, and they've been able to bring us really, really high quality digital data and technology contractors. We've embedded a talent partner, but they've also supported us with our move to more permanent team members. And I won't steal Lauren's thunder. I'm bigging you up here, big time, Lauren. I won't tell them how many, but Lauren has been instrumental in bringing in an enormous number of people as permanent candidates. So from our point of view, this has been really, really successful. So that's the first bullet on here. So the rest of this slide talks a little bit about what we're planning. So in the conversations that we've had and discussions we've had around this crisis, it seems there's an opportunity here for CDPS to offer our services in a wider sort of way. So we're procuring in a recruitment partner from April time, helping us bring in flexible labour, permanent staff, and so on. But the idea is that the contract will be enabled for use by other Welsh public sector organisations. So that's really interesting. So for instance, if you're in the NHS in Wales, then perhaps there are people you could come to CDPS and this recruitment partner can work with you, create the packs. You can see draft the role and person specs, include key information and all of those things, just to try to take the burden off and work in a centralized, more efficient way. And that applies to everybody across the public sector. There's no minimum financial commitment. But if you're interested in watching this and you're thinking, oh, that's something I'm interested in, I'd be really grateful to hear from you in terms of, how many people, how many roles you think you might want. We wouldn't hold you to any of that, but if you're interested in taking part in that, that will be helping us establish the maximum value of the contract. Okay. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to whip through this next bit. Here's some of the other quick wins that we're thinking about. Case studies of successful recruitment campaigns, how things have worked. We had a really interesting conversation and a bit of an event, really, run by NPT, Nice Port Talbot Local Authority, who have been recruiting digital people for the last few months. And Chris, the CDO there, did a really, really useful reflection on how that's gone and lessons learned and such like. But that seems to be really valuable. we're looking at some of the others there, publishing a State of the Nation, pay and review of job descriptions in use. Okay, last bit from me, next steps. So the next steps slide remains to be finalised, I suppose. We are prioritising, we're working on the roadmap, we're working with the steering group, lots of really interesting members there, and lots of comments and ideas from right across the public sector, sharing pains and potential gains. Again, if you're interested, we'd really love to hear from you if you wanted to be part of that steering group. It's quite a small scale thing at the moment, but we're looking to make that more representative in the future. Okay, I think that's it from me. I'm going to hand over now to Lauren. Over to you, Lauren. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. And just to introduce myself for those I haven't met before, as you can see, my name's Lauren Power and I work for a company called Future Heads. Myself and my director, Andrew Rogers, have been partnered with CDPS since April this year. And I was initially brought in to help reduce CDPS's contractor reliance by owning their permanent recruitment process as their internal talent partner. Andrew also implemented a 2-week discovery project, running interviews with senior stakeholders and contractors to sort of better understand that recruitment process to date, as well as onboarding and contractor management. In addition, we carried out an audit on the social footprint of CDPS, including the careers page with a competitor analysis. And off the back of this, created a report that was based off of his findings, which was then presented to SLT to help share the next steps within CDPS. And we've then been actioning these points internally then since April. And then also my colleagues in Future Heads have been helping to deliver contractors within CDPS since November last year, as well, as Pete mentioned. So yeah, that's just a bit of an overview of some of the ways that we've been supporting CDPS as an organisation. And then just to cover off some of the main focus points that I'll be looking at during my part of this webinar, I'll be giving you an overview of CDPS's journey so far with their most recent recruitment campaign, then delving into ways that have worked for us when looking to attract talent within that DDAT space, such as reworking job descriptions, approaching passive candidates, and the use of social media as a recruitment tool. And I'll also be scattering in some statistics then around the candidate market that, yeah, hopefully you'll find interesting. So before we start, I just wanted to set the scene for the current candidate market. Andrew shared these stats with me after attending an event with CW Jobs. And I feel as though they're really indicative of the changing candidate mindset when approaching a job search and how organisations need to adapt in response to these, quite ruthless behaviours by candidates. So as you can see, 88% of candidates would attend interviews for more than one job at a time. 54.6% would accept a job while they continue to search. 47.4% would accept more than one offer at a time and then negotiate the salary offer. And 55.6% of those negotiating would reveal what another company was offering during that process. So candidates are being really ruthless in their job search. And in order to counteract this as employers, we need to be able to work at pace to get the best candidates through the recruitment process. We also need streamlined, clear recruitment strategies and all the tools in place in order to retain staff that are in post already. And I'm hoping to address these areas then throughout the 3-part Attract, Recruit, Retain webinars, and then in the supporting blog posts as well. If we could do the next slide, please, Elise. Good. Thank you. So our journey so far. I've outlined in the table a full breakdown of the hires that we've made as a business since May 2022, as well as the candidate source that they've come from. So all in all, we've made 17 permanent hires in the space of 5 months, ranging from interaction, content and service designers and user researchers, to the head of user-centred design, as well as more operational roles such as our Welsh translator and personal assistants. And I'd also like to add that 15 out of 17 of these hires have been Welsh nationals. And although this webinar is mainly focused on attracting talent within that DDAT space, these methodologies can be used across departments. And as you can see, most have come from direct headhunting on LinkedIn. And this has really proven to be the best strategy when approaching talent within that DDAT space. We've also had a few that have come through from candidate referrals, from internal members of staff. And finally, the remaining hires have come from third-party sites such as Slack, Twitter, and directly from our CDPS website. So to start, I wanted to focus on the changes we have made to our job descriptions. I appreciate that some of you have fairly strict guidelines in place when it comes to qualifying roles, but this is what has worked for us as an organisation, and there are only slight changes that have made a real impact to the quality of candidates that we're getting through. So a fairly simple one to highlight is the inclusion of salary information. A study done by CV Library found that there was a 25 to 35% drop in applications when salaries aren't listed on the job descriptions. So it's a really simple and kind of quick win to add to your job description if you're not doing that already. And one section we have also added in is the progress so far piece. So this is your chance to get candidates excited about the role. And I found that it's really resonated with DDAT candidates if you're able to kind of highlight the challenges that you're facing and how this role will be directly involved in helping the organisation confront these challenges. So often when I'm talking to candidates who are in private sector, looking to make a move to public sector, who are being confronted with this drop in pay, what excited them about the role is the chance to get involved in challenging projects that are meaningful and kind of really making a difference within local communities. So make sure that you're writing about that in your job descriptions. And I know there's a lot of discussion happening around salary and pay bandings when comparing kind of public and private sector. So identifying areas that you're essentially beating private sector in and highlighting those on your job descriptions is essential. You know, a clear area are the benefits you have access to when working in public sector, such as pension, holiday allowance, flexible working, and job security. You know, these are all things that can be really enticing to somebody who's working in private sector and would definitely encourage them to make an application. It's also a good way of encouraging more diverse talent to apply. You know, if you have really diverse policies and benefit schemes, such as, you know, menopause leave or flexible bank holiday leave, then these are things that you need to be advertising on your job descriptions. You know, it's all about identifying areas that you excel in and shouting about those in your advertisements. And as Pete mentioned, you know, there needs to be a shift in mindset so that public organisations are selling their roles to candidates and not just relying on kind of legacy recruitment methods. And finally, I've highlighted the how to apply section. It's really important to make it as easy as possible as you can for candidates to apply to your roles. So if you can let them just apply with a CV, that's great. But the most I would ask of a candidate is a CV and a covering letter. You know, it's no longer an employer-led market. And if a candidate has 10 jobs that they want to apply to and your role requires them to kind of fill in an application form, complete an activity, and essentially duplicate information from their CV, more often than not, they'll choose not to apply. So make sure that it's as easy as possible so that you don't put anybody off during that application process. And it's also important to be clear what the next steps are within that process and to add timescales that you stick to. So often candidates can feel as though their CV has gone into this black hole and tend to start looking elsewhere. So make sure that you stick to timescales to ensure that candidate control. So one section that I wanted to give its own slide was the please keep reading section of our job descriptions. this is in place as a call to action for people from minority and diverse backgrounds to not let their imposter syndrome take over and to make sure that they make an application. I really can't tell you how many people have directly referenced this section as the reason that they made an application. We actually have an associate delivery manager who's doing amazing work with us and has actually just passed her probation period, who made an application off the back of reading this section. So I would really recommend having that ED&I statement at the end of all of your job descriptions. And this statement will be available for people to use as a resource on our website as well. So moving on to engaging with passive candidates. A passive candidate is, as Pete mentioned, again, is someone who isn't actively seeking employment, so isn't trawling through job boards and engaging with recruiters actively. And it's really important to have this passive candidate recruitment strategy, because if you don't, you're actually missing out on 75% of the candidate market. Some of the passive candidate strategies I've highlighted are up on screen. So the most successful for us being the LinkedIn headhunting strategy. This involves creating a pipeline of candidates on LinkedIn, using a recruiter license, and then curating messages around the role. And it's important that these messages maybe draw upon some experience within the candidate's profile that would be relevant for that role. And that you also allow candidates to kind of chat with you directly prior to them making an application, because it's a really important way of kind of getting buy-in from the candidate in that first instance as well. This technique, it does take time and therefore costs money, but it's been the most successful method whilst recruiting within that DDAT space, with roughly 60% of our hires coming directly from this LinkedIn headhunting strategy. However, I do appreciate that not all HR teams are able to include this. So I've also included some quick cost-effective wins that have also worked in supporting our recruitment campaign. So using third-party sites such as Creative Cardiff, Under Consideration, or the Die Line. These are all digital magazines that allow you to advertise your roles with them for free, and they get circulated to relevant candidates who are subscribed to these magazine services. I would say it's also important to touch base with internal members of staff as well, who are in these roles already, and asking them for recommendations on where to start your search, and if there are any third-party sites that aren't on your radar already. I got most of these options from talking directly on to our senior user researcher and visual designer, who actually pointed me in the direction of Creative Cardiff and Under Consideration. So, you know, it's really important to utilise the knowledge that you have on site already. We've also used cross-government Slack channels such as XGov Slack to advertise the roles and to spread the word. And outside of that, the utilisation of social media is a great way to build up your employer brand. So maybe asking current employees to do a day in the life so that when people do look to advertise these roles, then candidates already have that understanding and the buying of the business and they want to make an application. Obviously, if you really want to be futuristic, you can use platforms such as Instagram and TikTok to advertise your roles as well, you know, with targeted ads or advertising on the company's pre-existing account if you have one already. And I've also included a few Welsh universities, as we have recently hired a commercial associate within CDPS. And I use the free advertisement channels that are hosted by these universities to get these roles in front of relevant candidates as well. So it's really all about being creative and utilising third-party sites and social media in order to actively push your advertisements in front of relevant candidates. Ultimately, to ensure consistency, all of these methods need to feed back to your recruitment page on your website, which should be adhering to user-centered design and be full of useful information regarding projects you work on and the culture of your company as well. I also wanted to share some data again from CW Jobs around the best time to advertise your roles. and when it's best to start approaching these candidates. So they found that the job advertisements get the most views on a Wednesday, and most people search for new roles between 9 AM and 11 AM. So if you're looking to implement any of these strategies, I'd definitely recommend doing that on a Wednesday morning. And finally, Future Head's lead ED&I strategist, Alicia Richardson, has been able to give me some pointers for this webinar on the best way to attract kind of diverse talent as well. First and foremost, it's important to be honest about your current ED&I strategy and to realise that there's really no silver bullet when confronting this issue. People tend to be able to see right through kind of broad sweeping statements on this topic and often resonate more when a company is upfront and honest about areas of improvement. So being aware of the company branding and culture, having a meet the team function on your website or a day in the life post made by a colleague on social media, all of these things help not only advertise your brand, but make people from underrepresented groups feel safer when applying to these roles. And this has been said before, but it's really important, providing information on benefits, policies and salaries on your website or job descriptions can help demonstrate how you're fully embracing that ED&I strategy. So it's really important to be transparent with this information. And finally, but certainly not least, making your application process as accessible as possible. So not having big chunks of texts on your job descriptions, perhaps having a function for people to have these job descriptions read out to them, you know, outlining that you're happy to make reasonable adjustments and listing these adjustments that you can make to the interview process. These are all ways that we have started to confront that ED&I strategy within CDPS, as well as partnering with Alicia to help us kind of live and breathe these strategies. We will also be talking through how to run inclusive and accessible interviews in a lot more detail in the second webinar on the 15th of December. So yeah, I mean, these are just some of the changes that we have implemented in order to compete within that DDAP candidate market. And there definitely isn't a one size fits all, but hopefully something has resonated with you and you'll be able to implement that change. You know, whether it's a third-party site to target passive candidates, a change to your job descriptions or a LinkedIn headhunting strategy, these are all tried and tested ways to start attracting candidates within that DDAT space. And of course, you know, please feel free to get in touch with me afterwards if you have any questions. But for now, I'll pass you over to Gemma, who'll be diving deeper into our social media strategy.
Diolch, Lauren. Hi everybody, so I'm Gemma and I'm the Communications Officer working within the CDPS comms team. I lead on social media and comms and engagement reporting. So I'm going to run through my social media top tips with you to help make your social stand out from the crowd. So to start with, I'm going to run through how I would recommend writing a post. So apologies if I'm teaching you grandmother to suck eggs. So you want to be creating white space within your post so that it's easier to read. So you can see the difference in the post I've included here. So keep sentences short and avoid jargon. As many of you would be aware, Twitter has a character limit and LinkedIn doesn't, but these are principles that apply to both platforms. So there are free tools such as Grammarly or Hemingway that can help with shortening long sentences or suggesting alternative words. For lists, so you may have a number of roles, use bullet points. Emojis can bring life to your post, but use them sparingly as they aren't considered accessible. So hashtags, use hashtags, but not too many. It's recommended no more than 3 on LinkedIn and Twitter, as the algorithm will see your post as spam. So the rule doesn't apply to platforms such as TikTok or Instagram. So if you're not sure what hashtags to use, I would recommend doing a search and you can see what other accounts are using. On LinkedIn, suggested hashtags come up automatically when you post directly within the platform. Twitter also has this functionality, but it can be clunky compared with LinkedIn. So I would avoid posting the same message over and over. I tend to write 2 to 4 posts and then stagger posting. Mix up your writing and test starting posts with questions instead of statements. I'd also consider using video. A day in the life of videos are becoming popular on platforms such as TikTok, but they could be adapted for Twitter and LinkedIn. The images you can see on screen are from the Department for Trade, who produced a video on what it was like to work for them. So I'll pop a link into the chat so you can have a look at that shortly. So when it comes to images, faces are better than text. As a virtual first organisation, using genuine real-life photos has been difficult. Previously, we were using text-based images for recruitment and weren't getting as much engagement. So we tend to look for non-cheesy posed photos on sites such as Pexels to show a more human side to our brand. In an ideal world, and as we grow, we're going to use genuine photos of staff. So watch this space. So showing the culture. Showing a snapshot of behind the scenes is important, as it will give potential candidates an idea of what it's like to work for you. So by looking out for national days such as International Happiness Week at Work, it gives you a chance to let staff feedback and feel more involved. So we did a short poll and asked CDPS staff what made them happy at work and created a short video. This gave us better reach as we could see how many views the videos got, and it gave a little snapshot into what it's like to work for CDPS. On Twitter, it was our best media tweet in September, which suggested that people are interested in learning more on behind the scenes at CDPS. So influencers, look for influencers, and I don't mean the ones you see on TikTok and Instagram. So start by looking at those who use social media within your own organisation. So do they pack a punch on social? Could you ask your senior leadership team to share the post to their network? A share with a comment is the gold dust, as it pleases the social media algorithms. So if you're on Twitter, Matt Dukes is worth a follow. So he publishes a weekly newsletter featuring 10 top public service digital roles. It's worth tagging him into the roles you have, and he will retweet or feature them in his newsletter. As you can see, the newsletter itself has an impressive mailing list and open rate. And then once you've tried these little tactics out, check out your analytics. Has it driven traffic to your website? Did speaking to that influencer have the desired effect? How many people saw or clicked your post? And then finally, the tools I'd recommend. So Grammarly or Hemingway are free and can check your grammar and spelling. Character Count Online. I like this because it allows you to edit online and you can check if any Welsh posts need re-editing. So Pexels for free stock images, Canva for graphic design, and then I've also included social visual alt text. It's a plugin I use to see alt text on social media platforms. It's surprising to see how many organisations forget to put alt text on images, which effectively narrows your pool of candidates. So I hope you found that useful. Feel free to connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn, because I'd be happy to share the roles with my network. And now I'm going to hand back to Pete. I think we're hopping back to Menti Pete.
Yeah, no, oh, lost my voice then listening. Yes, please, if we could just ask everyone to go back to that Menti poll that we started with and just fill in your thoughts again now following this session. That would be really appreciated. There have been lots of comments in the chat, so thanks very much for participating in that. And I can see Andrew's just come back on a question about where our hires have come from. Sorry, I've totally lost my voice now. I did all that talking before, now nothing for 10 minutes or whatever. So Aled, thank you very much for your comments. I think you're not alone. That's it's not very comforting, but I think you're not alone in that feeling that it's more difficult now than it has been for 30 years. We would be delighted to work with you. So, you know, I'm sure we've got your email address from signing up. So if I drop you a line, we can invite you into the steering group or follow up as well. So see what we can do there. So thank you very much for that. I think the other questions that I've seen were mainly around the video being available to download and being able to share, and Gemma's answered all of those with, yes, it'll be on YouTube, and if that's an issue, then perhaps let us know, and we can see if we can sort something out with an alternative. Richard made a comment earlier about discussing with HR teams. Yeah, spot on. I think you're right. I've had some conversations with HR teams in the last month, and I've been blown away by how forward thinking they are, but they were amongst the first to admit that there are other processes that hamper things. And it is quite new, you know, this whole mindset shift that I mentioned earlier, this whole looking at it from a candidate's perspective. But yeah, it's a difficult job, and trying to change things around and approach it in a different way is not to be underestimated, I think. I just scrolling down, some more questions have come in. What can be done to attract from the private sector rather than just moving people around within the public sector? It's a really good question. Thanks, Sean. I wonder, Lauren, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think that is obviously a harder thing to do, because you are they are being confronted with the sort of pay gap that's been referenced within the webinar. But I would definitely say there's a lot to be said around, obviously, the benefits that they would have access to, you know, such as the pension scheme, flexible working policies. Like, a lot of these things people don't have access to them when working in public sector. And we have had some people who are looking to make that transition across into public sector. So again, it's just about having a look at the areas that you're excelling in as a business. And, you know, there are loads of great things and great projects to get involved in when working in public sector. So making sure that you're hitting these points in your job descriptions and in your conversations with candidates, and even referencing them during the interview process. These are all things to get people excited about the roles that they're going to be working on. Hopefully that helps.
I lost my move button. Okay, thanks, Lauren, much appreciated. I'm just going to come back on Richard's point in the chat that we're in danger of creating a DDAT roundabout within the public sector and competing against each other for the same individuals. And I can't agree with you more. I think that's definitely something we're aware of. I think there's a couple of things here. So that what we're talking about at the moment, and particularly this ARR, Attract, Recruit, Retain work stream, is all about pretty quick fixes, things that we can do instantly to try and alleviate some of the pressure, some of that crisis feeling. But it does form part of our longer term thinking as well. So we're thinking, you know, we need to attract people from outside, private sector ideal, from other countries. Can we reach people who have a connection to Wales but have left, perhaps? Are there people working over the border or, you know, elsewhere that would like to come back? Lots of other potential places to recruit from. But yeah, so we need to grow our own as well. That's the other bit that I was trying to come to. So we're conscious of that. That just takes a little bit longer. So when we're looking at things like apprenticeship development, we are working within CDPS at the moment, what we call associate DMs. So they're new to the role, with the potential to grow in that role and then potentially move elsewhere. That sort of thing, we're looking at that. And we've also been talking quite a lot with the Welsh Local Government Association on an internships model as well. So the only trouble with that is that it's a longer term thing. So I'm fully with you. We don't want to be stealing. We want to be growing and building that future talent pipeline. And succession planning. Yeah, Shikara just mentioned in there. Thank you. Yeah, you're right. Succession planning, definitely better across Wales. And that's kind of what we'd like to do with this group as well, is bring ideas like that together, share those ideas and see if we can come to some consensus. Wales, I said earlier, it's not terribly big, but we're nimble enough. We're able to move and we're able to talk to each other, and we do rely on each other quite a lot as well, I think, across the sector. So, okay, Alan's come back with a comment. I think the benefit gap between public and private sector has closed to such a point that pay is a deciding factor. Also, the drive to contribute to society and public service is not as big a driver for many as it was in the case in the past. Yeah, that's definitely a consideration, isn't it? I think it links back to how do we sell the benefits of working in the public sector? You know, pay is a massive factor for people, but it isn't the only source of why people get jobs. So it's almost a case of if we can increase the pay, then great. I can't see that happening anytime soon. But what can we do? Yeah, what can we do about attracting people in and yeah, keeping them as well? Yeah, not disappearing off the private sector. Okay, right, I'm trying to keep up with the chat. There's lots going on. Thank you ever so much. It's great to have a busy set of questions coming in. It's brilliant. Thank you. Succession planning is agreed. We need to be more creative. You're right, creativity is key here. We're all working in an environment with, you know, tight budgets, no time, always busy, more to do than, you know, we've got time and people to cope with. But there's a challenge of retaining staff in the current roles, and pay in other organisations is seen to be increasing. It's a good point. Retain is another one of our webinars, so I'm just going to shamelessly plug that and say we'll try and deal with some of that later on. So if you come back to our next retain webinar, that would be great. And Richard's comment about immediacy, you're right. So yeah, so we definitely see this as a multi-stage problem to try and tackle. As I say, the current crisis and the immediacy bit is, can we do anything as an arm's length body with access to a recruiting organisation that could quickly find specific digital roles and bring people in? Can we also, in the same vein, look at upskilling existing people, look at reskilling people, returners to work and all that? But admittedly, yes, that will take longer. I think you're right. Rob has mentioned we all assume have to use fixed job descriptions and such. As jobs have been evaluated and graded, new posts can then be added, but that process takes some time. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think looking back at some of the other chat messages, I think some people have said about sharing some of this with HR. I think, you know, bringing people who are the experts in that in your organization together early on and trying to find a way around it. There's no easy solution. I mentioned Chris Owen and Nick Potal, but that's an ongoing situation as he's described. Some of it is new, some of it is quite scary for different parts of the organization. They've never done that sort of thing before. But ultimately, we're not going to get the digital teams and digital people that we need with the skills that we absolutely need to make public services better, more efficient, more scalable, more effective, and fix lots of the issues that we have if we cannot bring these people in. So, you know, we've got to start somewhere, I think. Okay, there's still lots coming in. Any advice for organisations who have existing roles doing essentially DDAP work that need to move to the new framework and associated pay levels? Yeah, that's tricky. Pay is a massive, massive issue right across the sector within organisations. At the moment, my honest answer, Richard, I'm sorry, is no. I don't have any advice for those organisations with those existing roles. It's just it's an ongoing thing. But I think perhaps we can, you know, if we can get people addressing some of this openly like this, perhaps in webinars, maybe there are other people who can jump on and answer some of those questions. Perhaps we can work together to try and fix some of that. Pay, it's not unfixable, but it's really, really hard to fix, I think, at the moment. But, you know, we can't allow services to fail either. That's the driver for me. I'm struggling to keep up with all the messages. It's brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. Our HR and diolch yn fawr, thanks Illtyd. Our HR have been flexible enough to allow us in ICD to move from application forms to CV and covering letter, and that's made a big difference. Yeah, I think that's a great move. I think I can see Lauren nodding in the background here as well. So just a word on that. If I was a job seeker and I had a particular digital skill that I was looking for a new role in which I could, you know, exploit that digital skill, but I have to fill in a dozen different application forms that are all completely different layouts, different references, different sections for history, job history, work experience and all the rest of it, I'm far less likely to do that than if I can create one CV and a covering letter that I can tune to adjust to those jobs. So from an applicant's perspective, and this is the thing I'm advocating for, really, we've got to look at it from an applicant's perspective. That CV approach might be a real game changer for people. Okay, Emma's mentioned, so I'm monopolizing these questions. Lauren, if you want to take any, feel free, please jump in. Gemma, similarly, if you've got any thoughts yourself, please jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on Kath's comment around the equal ops commitment prevents us from accepting CVs due to anonymity. Also, job security is no longer something I would want to advertise with the budget pressures we are facing. So just on the acceptance of kind of CVs, if you're doing that to help stop discrimination, our ED&I strategist, Lissy Richardson, has mentioned to me that you're almost just kicking the can later down the road. So if you're not sort of using the CV application because you don't want to see names and address and things like that, once it gets to interview stage, all of these issues can still arise. So it's more about kind of implementing different ED&I strategies that people live and breathe and that people understand, in order to not have that be a sort of overarching issue, rather than it being anonymizing CVs is the kind of stance that you take. And I'm happy to take it offline and give some more information on that as well.
Thanks, Lauren. Okay, there's still quite a few more in here. Let me try and deal with some of these. So thanks to Emma, who said with current budget it's hard to fit a DDAT structure to a digital team where we have to wear many hats. I think you're right. We hear this in lots of places. Lots of people tell us this. It's really difficult. And the answer to that is quite complex and quite hard. It's a lot of organizational change and maybe having multidisciplinary teams across the organization. And I know Emma's worked with us training up different members of non-digital specific services, so people from other service areas who have been on some of our training, just to understand what this digital thing and digital approach is all about. And maybe that's it. So, you don't have a centralized digital team, but maybe it's, more dispersed and you've got digital experts working in those teams. It's not an answer. I think you're right in what you're saying. It's really difficult. Okay, NHS insists on using the TRAC track app for recruitment. Yeah, I think we hear this quite a lot. Thanks, Richard, for that comment. It's everybody likes to have their own standardized procedure, because it does that. It standardizes applications and it makes certain people's jobs easier. It's a difficult conversation, but I think because we're at this crisis point, things have to change that the organization's never been willing to change. So I don't know who you pick that battle with, I'm afraid, but perhaps this one to have a think about. Maybe there's an alternative for critical roles or for specialist roles. I don't know, that's quite a difficult one.
I'm conscious of time.
All right. I'm not.
We are at 1 o'clock. Thank you everybody for taking part in today's webinar. What we'll do is we'll follow up with an email with a link to the recording. We'll have a little look at some of these questions as well and maybe try and answer some of them in that follow-up email. If you're interested, Pete would welcome people to join the steering group. Again, we can send information about that. Our next webinar is the 15th of December, and we're going to be talking about retaining that talent, or recruiting that talent, sorry. So again, I will send a link for people to come along to that. But yeah, thank you so much for all your brilliant questions. Diolch. See you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Bye.
all. Bye bye. Bye bye.